back to that first lockdown, I know.
No.
Raise your hand if you had somebody that you spoke to regularly during that lockdown, whether they were someone that was living down the street or whether they were someone on the opposite end of the world. Good, I'm glad we all have friends there. Keep your hand up if you would say that friendship was important to you, or is important to you still. So we can all agree that friendships are important to us. And you know something, the literature also agrees with us. It says that friendships are vital to our continued well-being and are a source of happiness and longevity and physical health. And yet, friendships are a field of study that has been neglected in health and well-being research. There is some, mostly it's with first-year students. This study here found that first-year students interact with peers in their immediate proximity and form long-term friendships. Now, normally I would spend forever and get some really easy points where I'd criticise the use of first-year students, but in this example, it is kind of valid. And we also know that creating and maintaining friendships is costly, both in the cognitive and the social mechanisms that underpin them. And as well, all research has pretty much taken place pre-pandemic, which kind of isn't anyone's fault, but we need to fix this. So how do we do that? Well, we know friendships are important, but how do we understand how we form friendships? How do we catch lightning in a jar? And I think as myself and Ben, we're onto something here. The answer lies in gaming. So, Dungeons & Dragons, which is a tabletop role-playing game, has been shown to help others build positive relationships. And this is a seminal paper for me. This is the one that kicked everything off. And it's also been shown that tabletop role-playing games can promote social inclusion and citizenship. And that came out literally last year. One that came out literally a few months ago. Gaming is a common interest that increases social engagement. And various news articles have gone out and reported that Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games, we must put that distinction out there, D&D isn't all tabletop role-playing games, have kept people connected during the pandemic. So we've got the ingredients here. We've got the start of something. So our answer lies in understanding how we form and maintain friendships. Our answer lies in a tabletop role-playing game. So, this is the recipe, or the spell components. See what I did there? So, I started off with 7 participants, and they were split across 2 groups. Both groups were kept separate from each other. And I got to know them over 5 weeks. So, week 1, we had introduction and role assignments. Both groups did this separately. Week 2 to 4, they played through a game of Dungeons & Dragons, and bear in mind that these are complete strangers at the very start. And at week 5, we had a focus group, again, keeping everyone separate. And the materials used, we're using Collaborate, I know, and also a virtual tabletop, which effectively is a space that we can all log into and share. And this lets us sort of place tokens down, place minis, place models, and it's sort of the equivalent of actually sitting around the table without sitting around the table. The adventure was Hollow by Richard Pett, and that adventure was chosen partly because of its difficulty, but also the only way to truly beat that adventure is by working together. So that is as much intervention as I had with the group. And we used NVivo for the transcription. I also want to highlight the observations. I only interacted with the groups at the beginning and the end. The beginning to say hello and to check in with everyone, and at the end to say goodbye and also to check in. And this happened every single week. So, there's our ingredients. Now we need to mix it together. Now we need the further components. So, I used IPA, and I went through separately the same stages for each group. So I started off with exploratory noting, and that was just free form, just going through the manuscript and just picking out what is interesting, both looking at the words that were said, but also looking at the meaning behind those words. A common example that we use in everyday life is we'll often say, "You're right," and you'll reply, "Yeah." But we often know that isn't always the truth, and sometimes there is an underlying subtext there. From there, those exploratory notes created experiential statements. And I looked across those experiential statements for similarities and differences to create personal experiential themes or pets. Now, I should clarify, this isn't referring to my dog Lexa, but rather this is referring to the name of these themes. And then I looked across those themes and I looked at what are the similarities and what are the differences. I've got crazy flowcharts I'm not going to show you, but I can email you them. They're absolutely insane. And these created group experiential themes. Now, I kept both groups in complete isolation from each other until the very last stage, quite literally last week. I know, last minute, that's my job. And I created group experiential themes across both cases. So it's only at that point did I get the big picture. And here's what I found. I hope I can read that. I'm going to pretend I can. I need glasses. So, we all play a role in our friendships. There are those that can facilitate the group, while there are others that take part. I want you to just think about that. Is there someone in your group that is always organising things? Is there someone in the group that isn't? Maybe switch that around. We're a part of something that can be shared within the group. So this is especially highlighted in the tabletop role-playing game because you are going through the story and the adventure together. We share in that experience, and what we'll do then is we'll share those stories with one another, we'll retell those stories. Retelling those stories helps to reaffirm our friendships, and we also get a little bit of a shared lexicon between each other. People can listen in to our conversations within our groups and have no idea what we're going on about. Yeah, it'll make perfect sense to you and me. Communication and empathy are big factors in maintaining a friendship. So just by showing understanding and just by showing kindness, we can go a long way to build a friendship with someone else. This happened in one of my focus groups. One of the participants was an introvert, the other was an extrovert, and I'm using the colloquial expression, not the scientific meaning behind that. And they discussed how they adapted to each other's communication styles, and they met in the middle. And I'm happy to report they're still friends. Woo! Study worked. My plan is coming together. But there is one theme, one really serious thing that I want to highlight. Safety, especially when meeting new people, is a big concern. So this study was able to provide a safety net for the participants. But as was highlighted by my two female participants, there is always a concern. There's always a fear. One participant commented that the study provided a safety net, and she talked how as a woman she always has to be on her guard, and that there is a level of fear in talking to strangers. This relates to her only following the known role of playing cleric in her game, because that's what she knows, and that's what gives her just a little bit of control. The second participant also commented to the study provided a safety net, and that I would not have brought on, the researcher, myself, would not have brought on a total dickwad, quote, into the study. She commented that if it was not for the safety net of the study, it was unlikely that she would have crossed paths with any members of that group. Rather, she would have gone out of her way to avoid them. Email addresses were also mentioned by both. There was a worry of, oh, you have my email now, and you know my name, and you know where I study. What else can you get? One of the participants highlighted that she only used her academic email and she was incredibly careful about her online presence. So you might be asking, well, what's that got to do with friendships? Well, this shows that a tabletop role-playing game is able to create a space with safeguards where sensitive issues like this can be discussed in a safe environment. We're also, and then we're going to move on to happier ones now. I say happier, we're going to move on to the pandemic. The pandemic has changed the way that we make friends, and these online interactions are seen as common now. We do more online interactions, whereas in-person events are special. I think we can all agree this is a very special event happening right now. And finally, friendships are more easily formed out of convenience. Now, I know a lot of this sounds like, oh, I'm just stating the obvious. But that's often the goal of research. It is to quantify and to define what we know so we can build on our understanding. We see the same people on a day-to-day basis. That makes those interactions and those connections easier to make. I'm going to skim over this bit because these never really became gets, but they were discussed and they are worthy of note. We talked about the number of people in a friendship that's been described as affecting the dynamic, time playing a role. The older participants said we grew closer over time and it got easier to connect or reconnect with people. We take our group roles depending on knowledge. So I mentioned group roles earlier on, and this is often this is often dictated by skill and familiarity with both a task and each other. To maintain the group, we will share information with each other for the benefit of the group, and at least 2 of the participants commented that tabletop role-playing games have helped to build their confidence. So, here's a few directions for further research. I think you mentioned the use of therapeutic practice. Understanding use of therapeutic practice with gaming. I think the name has escaped me, but I know there is a book, and I'll send it to you as well, which is talking about this topic. Currently, there is only one tabletop role-playing game that's been specifically designed for developmental theories, and that is called Critical Core by Game to Grow. So, that brings me to the end. I'm sure you're all relieved. Are there any questions? Rachel first. I'll go left to right.
I've got a couple of short questions, if that's all right. The first question is, why did you have 2 groups?
So that happened kind of by accident, if I'm totally honest. The groups were assigned depending on their availability.
Okay.
And I was able to get one group together on a Monday and the second group together on a Tuesday.
Okay, so it was more the kind of convenience of when to play the game. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
Pretty much.
Cool. Second question is, what sort of things were you looking to ask them about in the focus group?
So typically I was asking them to reflect on the experiences that they had. Then I asked them questions specifically about the friendships that they might have formed. So I was doing a little bit of fishing there.
Yeah.
But I also asked them to think back to previous experiences that they've had in tabletop role-playing games and see what information they could bring forward from that.
Okay, and the third question, she said that you know some of them have stayed in touch. Do you know to what extent, because I guess they only met in the online space, do you know to what extent those relationships have maintained in an online space, or have any of them actually
I know
friendship offline?
the 2-person group ended up meeting.
Okay.
The pair ended up meeting, and they were very, very happy about that. And they're still in email contact.
Right.
And I think the other group are chatting to each other, and I know there's talk about them meeting up once again for another game.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Did you take into account previous experience that people might have had with the tabletop games?
Yeah.
So people might feel a bit more confident going into them versus not, that kind of thing?
Yeah. The criteria, quite simply, was be over 18 and have some experience. It could be as little as 1 session in playing a tabletop role-playing game. And some of the questions did probe into their previous experiences.
Yes.
I'm asking you this question because I know you very well and I was your personal tutor, so please don't hate me. But
also thought that might be useful for you when you write on your discussion and so on and so forth, okay? So what did you get out of using IPA instead of thematic analysis?
Well, I got a headache.
That's a fair one.
But I also, from that, I got to really understand their lived experiences. And IPA is well used in health and well-being research. And I'm definitely going to look at using IPA again in the future for a similar kind of research.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.